सांस को अपनाए, सांस को अपनाए, ध्यानी बन जाए, सांस को अपनाए, ध्यानी बन जाए। ये दुनिया कैसे बदलेगी हमसे, हमसे, ये दुनिया कैसे बदलेगी हमसे, हमसे, हम खुद को कैसे बदलेंगे ध्यान से, विज्ञान से, आत्मज्ञान से। खुद को जानो तुम क्या हो, पहचानो तुम क्या हो, तुम क्या हो, तुम क्या हो, तुम क्या हो। सांस को अपनाए, ध्यानी बन जाए, सांस को अपनाए, ध्यानी बन जाए। सांस को अपनाए, ध्यानी बन जाए, सांस को अपनाए, ध्यानी बन जाए। तुझ में मुझ में क्या अंतर है, पशु पक्षी भी जीव है, तुझ में मुझ में क्या अंतर है, पशु पक्षी भी जीव है, जीने का हक सबको है, हम सब सारे एक है। ध्यान कर शाकाहारी बन, आत्मज्ञानी बन, खुद को जानो तुम क्या हो, पहचानो तुम क्या हो, तुम क्या हो, तुम क्या हो, तुम क्या हो। बन जाए, बन जाए, बन जाए, बन जाए, ध्यानी बन सांस को अपनाए, ध्यानी बन जाए।
Good morning, Masters. Thank you all for taking time to join. Thank you, Srini Garu.
Yeah, good morning, Masters. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay. So yesterday we talked about chapter 5, which was dealing with the state of presence. So there was one topic we did not cover yesterday, which is the Christ, the reality of your divine presence. So he was trying to explain the state of presence, and the intention, what he was trying to say is to be able to be aware, and as the stronger is your awareness, the better is your experience, basically. And the topic we are going to cover, the last one, is the Christ, the reality of your divine presence. So he is trying to explain the concept of consciousness, actually speaking. So he was saying, don't get attached to the word, which is don't get attached to the form. That's what he was trying to say. You can substitute the Christ for presence if that is more meaningful to you. For the sake of explanation, he was using the Christ as the word for the consciousness, and he is using the form for the explanation, which is the case with any tattva. Whenever we talk about any concept in our Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna explains it, or any other Ramayana is about Ram. So depending upon what we are talking about, we take the form to explain the consciousness. So the only difference between the Christ and the presence is that Christ refers to your indwelling divinity, regardless of whether you are conscious of it or not. Whereas the presence means your awakened divinity or God essence. So when we say consciousness, it basically is the formless thing we are talking about. When the same consciousness takes the form, it comes into it makes it available or visible to everybody in a certain form, and everybody is that form, to be frank. So Jesus was a man who lived 2000 years ago and realized divine presence, his true nature. And this is one sentence he said. Author is trying to explain what he was trying to say. So he said, before Abraham was, I am. So he did not say that I already existed before Abraham was born. He is trying to go beyond the dimension of time. That's what he was trying to say here. So he had gone beyond the consciousness dimension governed by time into the realm of timeless. So did he say, or when he said God, he's saying consciousness? There are different words used interchangeably. I think we talked about a little bit yesterday. I have always been, and I always will be. So he's, again, when somebody says, I was always been and I always will be, he's talking about past and future. So it means that it is bound by the time. So, but he said, am that I am, which is, that's what he was trying to say, before Abraham was, I am. So no time here, just presence. So he's always there, omnipresent. The second coming of Christ is a transformation. So he's talking about second coming of Christ from the Bible. So he's saying is a transformation of human consciousness, a shift from time to presence, from thinking to pure consciousness, not the arrival of some man or woman. So his perspective is basically saying whatever the Bible mentions about second coming of Christ, it basically is not the person coming here, but transforming our human consciousness. Basically, it's going from one level to another level. That's the transformation he's talking about. That's the second coming of Christ. Christ means consciousness here. Don't make Christ into a form identity. Avatars, divine mothers, enlightened masters, the very few that are real, are not special as persons. So they come in, they do whatever they need to do and move on. But they're all personification of the consciousness. So if you're drawn into enlightened teacher, it is because there is already enough presence in you to recognize presence of another. So there are many people who did not recognize Jesus as Buddha, as there are and always have been many people who are drawn to false teachers. So when they lived at that time, many people did not recognize them, also did not follow them as well. So there are a lot of other teachers at the same time who, what author says, false teachers. That means he's trying to say that they have not. He's actually explains some of the things which master is or teacher is supposed to be. So darkness cannot recognize light. Only light can recognize light. If only your master is an incarnation of God, then who are you? So he's trying to explain that his consciousness is in everybody, not just in your master or in your guru. He realized it, you did not realize it. That's the only difference. Identification with form means ego, no matter how well disguised it is. So, excuse me. So whenever the form comes, there are certain qualities that comes with it. As soon as you say form, the qualities, gunas, there is an ego. Without an I, you don't exist. Without the ego, you don't exist. So there is a certain amount of ego that comes with it. So that's the form. Whenever we talk about the form, but consciousness is there in every form. Use the master's presence to reflect your own identity beyond name and form back to you and to become more intensely present yourself. You'll soon realize that there is no time or yours in presence. Presence is one. So he is trying to explain the role of master or role of guru here in the sense. So when you don't want to be, you want to use your master to realize who you are, what you are, to understand the consciousness or to realize the consciousness. You don't want to be dependent on, you don't want to be dependent on the master only, except, I think he's talking about it as we go forward. So group work can also be helpful for intensifying the light of your presence. A group of people coming together in a state of presence generates a collective energy field of great intensity and raises the degree of presence of each member. He's talking about satsang here. So when a group of people get together, it's a satsang, and that has a huge energy field created because of the great intensity with certain similar individuals come together. So it helps transformation. It helps the individual to transform faster. However, unless at least one member of the group is already firmly established in it, and thus can hold the energy frequency of that state, the egoic mind can easily reassert itself and sabotage the group's endeavors. So he says in the satsang there should be at least one member who is firmly established. That means he is realized being, in a sense. So otherwise, basically the path or the discussion can go different directions. So the energy field, whatever we are talking about, is spent in a wrong direction or wrong place. So you must not come to depend on the group. Group is a way to transform yourself. You don't want to be depending upon the group or the master or the guru. nor must you come depend on teacher and master, except during the transitional period, when you're learning the meaning and the practice of presence. So if you're doing some sadhana, you talk to your teacher and or your guru, learn the sadhana and realize the touch the consciousness. During the transitional period, you talk to your teacher or you talk to anybody whom you want to talk to, but you are not depend on them. You are not in any way stuck. Without your teacher, you don't move forward, or without your guru, you cannot move forward. That's not the intention. The intention is your guru is there to show you the path, you walk the path. That's the topic. He was trying to explain the reality of your divine presence. We move on to the next topic, which is chapter 6, the inner body. So he kind of explains the inner body here. It's not the external body he's talking about. He's talking about the inner body. We'll go as we move forward. Being is your deepest self. So one of the things we have seen, author has used different words in different places to say the same thing. Consciousness, I think we touched it yesterday. Being, consciousness, God, Christ, Ram, Krishna, anything is basically representing the same consciousness. Basically, those are the synonyms. Basically, from the author's perspective, importance of having deep roots within or inhabiting the body. The body can become a point of access into the realm of being. So he's talking about again, inner body he's talking about here. Your body, without the body, you cannot do that. You need a body. But when you have the body, you use your inner body to be for your realization, for your sadhana. You have already had significant glimpses of being, but the mind will always try to squeeze it into a little box and then put a label on it. It cannot become an object of knowledge. In being, subject and object merge into one. So he is talking about divine oneness, and also he's talking about there are no two things. There is only one. Subject and object is the same. So you have already had significant glimpse of being. That means when you do, I think we kind of talked about yesterday, when you do in meditation or dharana, you have seen glimpses of being. You touched, there are no thought states in between. When that happens, you are trying to touch the being actually there. So he's trying, but I mean, it's in a one body and you have a name for it. That's what when he say put a label on it, it does not make any difference. So same consciousness exists in everybody. Doesn't matter what the name is. Being can be felt as the ever-present I am, that is beyond name and form. So present, the I am, so beyond the name and form. To feel and thus to know that you are, and to abide in that deeply rooted state is enlightenment, which makes you free. So when you touch that, when you are in that state, or you are in the state of being, you touched it and you are able to stay there for long times. So you reach the state of, and it is called enlightenment. That means you are there, you are already there, you are always be there. It's not like even if when you are not doing the meditation or you're not in dhyana, then you are touching it. But when you come out of dhyana, you're not touching it. That's not the state they are going to be in. Once you touch it, once you reach once it is deeply rooted, it means that you always touch him, touch the being. So in that state, you are called enlightened person, and you are free. When he says free, there are free from what? That's a question which comes, right? So free from the illusion that you are nothing more than your physical body and mind. So you got physical body and your mind. So I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. So when you go beyond your physical body and beyond your mind, then you are free. That's what he's trying to say. This illusion of self, as the Buddha calls it, a core error. So when somebody identifies himself as body and are with mind, so that's an illusion. So free from fear and free from sin. So author basically says that, I mean, obviously, once you're beyond body and beyond mind, fear, you overcome fear and the sin, basically, right? So you because only if you the fear exists in your mind or in your body. Sin exists only in your mind or in your body. So that's what he's trying to say. Next topic is look beyond the words. Again, this is something he author emphasizes over multiple chapters. So when he says beyond the words, don't get stuck with a word. Okay. I don't like the word sin. Okay, so this is a question that somebody has put in. It implies that I am being judged and found guilty. So somebody does not like the word sin, because when I say I have done a sin, then that means there is a judgment against that, and then you do not like that. So over the centuries, many erroneous views and interpretations have accumulated around the word, such as sin, due to ignorance or misunderstanding or desire to control, but they contain an essential core of truth. If you are unable to look beyond such interpretations and so cannot recognize the reality to which the word points, then don't use it. So if you're confused, if you don't like Christ, you can go with Rama. That's what he is trying to say. If you don't like Rama, go with Krishna. If you don't like Krishna, go with Shiva. It doesn't matter. So if you don't like the word, you use the word whatever you like and touch the consciousness. Once you reach the consciousness, then you will realize. Don't get stuck on the level of words. It's an abstraction, not unlike a signpost. It points beyond itself. So it's a direction, basically. The word honey isn't the honey. So when you say honey, if somebody explains what honey is, doesn't matter how long he can talk about honey, until you take a drop of honey and put it on your tongue, until you taste it, you don't know what honey is. So after you have tasted the honey, the word becomes less important to you, because once you tasted it, when you say honey, when somebody says honey, you know it, what honey is. You don't have to test it again. So it's similar to when somebody says consciousness, it's the same thing. So similarly, you can talk or think about God continuously for the rest of your life, but does that mean you know or have even glimpse the reality to which the word points? It really is no more than a mental idol. So when you say God, what he is saying is, unless you really touched it, it is just a mental idol. That means you see the God as a Christ or Ram or Krishna, Shiva, Amma. So that doesn't matter. So which idol you wanted to see it, but you limit yourself to that idol until you touch it. Until you touch it, it becomes you only see the God in the idol. That's what he's trying to say. For whatever reason you dislike the word honey, that might prevent you from ever tasting it. That means, again, using the same example, is basically, if you don't like honey, that means the word, you'll never get to it. You will never taste it. That means you are losing, you are missing an experience you're supposed to experience. You don't touch the consciousness ever. If you had the strong aversion to the word God, which is a negative form of attachment. You can replace God with any name you like, which is a negative form of attachment. You may be denying it, not just the word, but also the reality to which it points. You would be cutting yourself off the possibility of experiencing that reality. All this is, of course, intrinsically connected with being identified with your mind. So because this whole the form thing is the mind game, right? So when you see certain thing, certain form, you the whole thing basically it's a thought process or memory in your mind. That's what you're using basically to say that this is the God. If the word doesn't work for you anymore, then drop it and replace it with the one that does work. I think it's the same thing. You don't like Rama, you go with Krishna. You don't like Krishna, go with Christ. Doesn't matter. I don't like these words either. So this is another question. If you can go and continuing, they imply that there is something wrong with me. I am being judged. So if you don't like sin, then author says use unconsciousness or insanity. Doesn't matter. They are all being the same thing. So the person says that I don't like those words either. Then author says, then of course there is something wrong with you. Basically, it means you don't any of those words, none of them. It means you are not accepting something here. So I don't mean to offend you personally, but do you not belong to the human race that has killed over 2 million members of their own species in the 20th century alone? So he's talking about the violence happening. So that's a sin, basically. He's talking about this in the context of the violence that taken place because of seeing the not recognizing the consciousness in every form. That leads to the conflict, that leads to the killing. That's what author is trying to point out here. So you mean guilt by association? That's a question again. Author is saying it's not a question of guilt. As long as you are run by egoic mind, you are part of the collective insanity. Open your eyes and see the fear, despair, the greed, the violence that are all pervasive. See the heinous cruelty and suffering on the unimaginable scale that humans have inflicted and continue to inflict on each other, as well as on other life forms on the planet. You don't need to condemn, just observe. That is sin, that is insanity, that is unconsciousness. Above all, don't forget to observe your own mind. So in the mind, you have a certain form, and you only see that form as the form. All the other forms are, whatever the form you see, that is what you think as a consciousness for that, but the consciousness is beyond form. So when you don't recognize that, there is always be a suffering in the humanity. Next topic, finding your invisible and indestructible reality. You said that identification with your physical form is part of the illusion. So how can the body, the physical form, bring you the realization? So it basically a question where, okay, you said consciousness is beyond form, but you have a form. How do you bring the realization with the form you have? So the body that you see and touch cannot take you into being. So the body you have, external body he's talking about, that will not take you into being directly, because you need sadhana to get there. But that visible and tangible body is only the outer shell, rather than a limited and distorted perception of deeper reality. So to inhabit the body is to feel the body from within. So when you do the dhyana or dharana, try to feel your body inside. So that is the inner body he's talking about. To feel the life inside the body and thereby come to know that you're beyond the outer form. But that is only the beginning of an inward journey that will take you ever more deeply into a realm of great stillness and peace, yet also of great power and vibrant life. At first, you may only get fleeting glimpses of it. So we talked about no thought state or thoughtlessness state. So you see glimpses of it in the initial days of your sadhana. But through them, you will begin to realize that you are not just a meaningless fragment in an alien universe, briefly suspended between birth and death. So you're not simply born and live your life and die. That's basically meaningless for anybody. Underneath your outer form, you are connected with something so vast, so immeasurable and sacred that it cannot be conceived or spoken of. So words cannot explain it. You have to experience it. That's what he's trying to say. I am speaking of it not to give you something to believe in, but to show you how you can know it for yourself. You are cut off from being as long as your mind takes up all your attention. That's why we call it, we are talking about try to get to the thoughtless state or no thought state, which is the shunya sthiti. That's what we call it. So it happens continuously for most people. That means that distractions, the mind takes over. Pretty much everybody, it happens for the most. The mind absorbs all your consciousness and transforms it into mind stuff. You cannot stop thinking. Your whole sense of who you are is then derived from mind activity. Your identity as it is no longer rooted in being. Once you're rooted, once you're rooted in being, then you see the being. But until then, you see the identity defined by your mind. Your identity becomes a vulnerable and ever needy mental construct, which creates fear as the predominant underlying emotion. So, if you identify with your body or mind, fear is the consequence of it. So it naturally comes in. To become conscious of being when he say is again he replace the being with any god you like, any form you like, any consciousness you want to have. You need to reclaim consciousness from mind. It will free vast amounts of consciousness that previously had been trapped in useless and compulsive thinking. A very effective way of doing this is simply to take the focus of your attention away from thinking and direct it into the energy, where being can be felt in the first instance of invisible energy field that gives life to what you perceive as the physical body. So you can see exactly what he's talking about is what gives you the energy, what gives you the life, the prana. Okay, observe your prana. When you observe your prana, I mean, when you do meditation, dhyana, you focus on your breath. That's what we call it, right? So that when you observe your shwasa, when you observe your breath, that gives you the energy to your body. So that is the method. As you do it continuously over a period of time, you start getting into the state where you can touch the consciousness. That's what he's trying to say. Highlights of the, we'll get to the highlights towards the end. I will stop here. So now we can get into the dhyana. Clasp your fingers, cross your legs, close your eyes, and start focusing on the breath. 1 minute to go. Seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take your palms, put it on your eyes. Open your eyes and look at your palms. Thank you. So let me share my screen one more time. Let's look at the highlights from today's session. So let me maximize it. Okay. So today's session basically focuses on the idea of limiting ourselves with the form, and we need to start looking at every form as a part of the same consciousness. So we need to cultivate that habit. And the second point is start participating in group works. I mean, that's a satsang, which is that's the one which actually transforms a person. I mean, fast in the sense. Do not limit ourselves by words. If you don't like a word, he gave the example of honey. You can replace honey with God. So if you the practice, you need a practice to experiences. So just you need to take that honey, one drop of honey, put it on your tongue. That's what the example he says. That action is the dharana. So if you do that, you will taste it. Honey replaced with a God. Go beyond mind to experience the consciousness. So for that, you need the practice of focusing on. So during dharana, what you do, one of the things what we do basically is the focus on the breath. That is the pranic energy which you take to touch the consciousness or experience the consciousness or touch the being. Okay, so these are the 4 points we can take from today's session and start practicing them in our lives.
Thank you, Srinigaru. This was like an excellent session. And also the highlights, it's really touched on to what is needed and what we need to practice. Thanks for learning it together. Masters, anyone would like to share any experience or any questions? Please unmute and you can talk.
Good morning, Srinigaru. It's a really nice presentation that you took points in the PPT. It's a lot of effort from your side. I know that it's very. So we know that when you are teaching, we are not losing like concept because we are looking at the PPT. It's an amazing explanation. I didn't feel bored or anything for a second. Also, like it's very interesting. It's a hats off to you. It's a great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Manigar.
Thank you. Thank you all, Masters. If no further questions, thank you all for joining. We'll see you back again tomorrow. Have a great day and try to implement one item from today's what we learned. Thank you.
Thank you all.